Hello and thanks for watching this Cloud9 ERP Solutions video and subscribing to our channels. In this series of videos of Executive in the Know, we're going to create an alert to indicate when an AP bill goes over the purchase order line amount. This is a big challenge. If you're looking to control costs, you create all these purchase orders, you have a lot coming in the door, and when the bills come in, of course you can spot check it. But from an executive position, it's nice to know when there's an adjustment maybe that's over 10%. So in this video, we're going to show you how to do that. We're looking at a bill right now that is for $4,000. This particular line item, this widget, is $4,000. And you can see over here, if we click on the purchase order for that invoice, our original request to the vendor had it priced at $3,500. So this is an example of a problem, right? We don't want to pay more. There may be exceptions when we do, and we'd like to leave it to our people to work through those exceptions and manage vendor relationships. But if it gets excessive, that can be a problem. So what we'll do here is we'll create a business event to monitor that if our AP line is over 10% of the original purchase order line, then we'll send ourselves an alert telling us that this is a problem and all the details to look into it. So the first thing we need to do is we need to get this data together. We need to be able to see the two amounts and then compare them. And once we've done that, we can then have our business event trigger that alert. So the first thing we're going to do is create a generic inquiry. We'll go in, create a new one. And this is going to be AP PO line. Okay. We'll publish it to the UI. We need it to be part of the user interface. And we'll just put it in our data view. Publish to the UI is relatively new in Acumatica. It gives us a little better handle on how to do it. And we'll grant this for all roles. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to pick up the AP line. So how do we get that? We're not really sure how to get that. We can go back to Bills and Adjustments. And as an admin or a customizer, we can hit Control-Alt. And we can click on a column, typically quantity or cost will be great. We'll click on it, and we can quickly see that it's the AP Tran table. We'll go back to our generic inquiry. We'll pick AP Tran. And we'll save it. That'll get us started. Now let's add some columns. We'll add a column for maybe the reference number of the bill in itself. Some of these columns won't be needed for comparing whether or not the amounts match, but they might be helpful for our email that we're going to send out. You know, this is the invoice. Look into it. So some of these fields we can add later. I'm just going to add a few now. So we want the reference number. I'd love to know the date. I'd like to know the amount. So that's Curry line amount right here. So that's the individual line's amount. And maybe we'll even give ourselves the inventory description. That might be useful for the email. Let's take a look at what that looks like. Okay, so we have a lot of line items here. Notice there is no description, and we have the wrong date field. So let's go back, and we'll save that. I understand why we don't have inventory line items, because if it's a utility bill, we're not going to have a description for an inventory item. We'll get to that later, but if I sort by descending, you can see that the field works correctly. And if we go back, we can add maybe the inventory ID as well, just to make things consistent. Now, we need to get the PO information in here. So we need to get the PO linked. So we'll go over to Data Sources, and we'll add a related table. And once again, you can go to the purchase order, you can go to any screen you want and look up and see what table we're looking for here. But in this case, I know that it's PO line. So we'll select that. We'll click select related table. That'll do all the join work for us. We'll click add. Now we have an additional table here. We'll go back to results grid. And we don't need a lot of information here, but we do want the line amount. So Curry line amount. And we'll save it. I'd also like to add the PO order number. And again, save it. Okay, so if we view this again, we now have our vendor invoice number, and we have our cost on the AP side, and we have our line cost for the PO side. And we also have our PO order number. The next thing I want to do is give these two different caption names because they're both exactly the same, and I might not be able to tell them apart later. So I'll go back, and our Curry line amount here is the AP invoice one, but I'm missing the caption column here, so let me turn that on. I'll put on all the columns. And we'll go over to caption, and we'll say AP amount. And for the PO line, we'll say PO amount. Save it. Go back and view it again. And that makes more sense to us. We can also do something here where we're maybe moving these lines next to each other. And by the way, that'll work because we haven't reconfigured the columns. So that's why these go together. If you've gone in and you've moved columns around already, Acumatica will store the setting, and anything you do over here in the generic inquiry won't matter until you go into your column configurator and reset to default or delete default configuration. Now, the next thing we want to do is we want to make sure that we're only getting normal purchase orders. So I happen to have construction turned on, so we're seeing subcontracts. So just to make sure everything is clean, we only want to get purchase order of normal type. So we'll go back to our generic inquiry. We'll go to data sources, and we'll add our purchase order. We always like to link from something that has not just the number, but the type as well, typically. So I'm going to select this one. And then I'll add a condition where the type, so the order type, is equal to, and we won't get this drop down until we check from schema, but from schema can be very helpful because it'll give you the possible options for filtering. So I'm going to select normal here and click save. We'll look at it again. And now we're getting something. If I sort by descending, you notice we're just getting purchase orders, no subcontracts or anything like that. Okay, now we need a column that tells us whether or not there's a problem between the two. So we'll go to generic inquiry, we'll go to results grid, and we'll make our own column. Doesn't matter what table we use, but we're going to look up and find our Curry line amount for the AP Tran. And we'll also put our PO line Curry, and that gets us started with our fields. And we're going to say equals IIF, that's the condition. You could find all this stuff here under other, that's your expression. You put your expression in there, and then the first part is true, the second part is false. So the operator here we're going to use is, first off, we're going to say if it's equal to, and if it is equal to, we'll say same. And if it's not, putting another comma here, we'll say, I need a single quote, different, and end parenthesis. We'll click Save. And we'll view it again. And you see a lot of same here. But if I click on this and sort by ascending, you can see there's quite a few different. So this is the AP line amount, 91,000. I'm taking this example, 153,000 was the purchase order amount. So we're okay, obviously, if it's less. We have a problem with if it's more. So we could change this and actually pick up the 10% that we're looking for. So we'll go into that formula, bring up our formula editor. And what we'll do here is we'll change this line. I'm just going to copy it, put it on a separate line for now. And what I want to do is I want to say if the two of these are divided by and it's greater than or equal to 1.1, then we're going to say over, and we're going to then say under. We'll make this a little bit nicer. Over 10%, under 10%. So we're taking the invoice line amount and we're dividing by the PO line amount. And if that is greater than or equal to 1.1, then we're over 10%. But if not, we're under 10%. So I'll get rid of this top line. We don't need it anymore. And we'll validate and click OK. We'll also give it a name. And we also want to create a condition where if the line item is 0, we're not getting a divide by error. So we'll go query line amount for the AP Tran is greater than or equal to or greater than 0. And same thing with the PO. We'll save it and view our inquiry. And you could see that all of these are under 10%. But if we sort by ascending, you can see a few are over 10%. And you can see them right here. Additionally, so we know what we're doing here, let's also add that formula in. So we'll go to Fields, and we'll look for our amount. And we'll take this field, and we'll take the query line amount from the PO field, and we'll divide by and click OK. So that'll give us the amount that it's over or above. And if we want this to look better, right now it's going to show us a decimal form. But if we go over to our purchase order and we scroll over to the right, we could look for discount percent. And that's DIC PCT. If we go back, we can use that as our schema field. And then it should format correctly. And we don't absolutely need this, once again, for the trigger, but it'll be nice to be able to put it into our email that we're sending out. And since we're making this a percentage, one thing we might do is format this correctly so it shows up nicely. So we could multiply this by 100 and minus 100 so that we get the difference. So I'll put this in parentheses and we'll click OK, save it. And if we view our inquiry, you can now see the percentage. If we click on difference and sort by ascending, you can see that this one, the AP amount was over 25%, this one was over 14%, and so on and so forth. Now that we have this inquiry, as records, as lines are created, we're going to evaluate each of these lines and look for a value that's a problem. And we can either look at the difference amount, which is visually nice, or we could look at the percentage. So let's go to business events. We'll create a brand new one. Now we'll select our screen name, which is our GI. And once again, we're going to trigger by record change, not schedule. We could trigger for each record. Once again, you can group by records if you want to. If you only want to send out individual emails, instead of sending an email out for every line, you could do that. We'll create our trigger condition. So what we want is when record is inserted. Now, there's a few different ways to do this. We could create a shared filter in this GI so that only the records that meet the criteria are already only sent to us, and then we're just looking for record inserted. We could do that, or we can test it at the business event. For the purpose of making this simple, I'm going to go over to our generic inquiry. I'm going to create a shared filter. So we'll take the percentage is greater than or equal to 10. We'll save it. Click OK. Select shared. Save it again. And apply. And you could see it's properly picked up just these 3 records. Now we'll go back to our business event. And we'll look for shared filters. We could see this one. Our trigger condition, we'll select it as record inserted, and then we'll create our subscriber. So in this scenario, we'll create an email notification, and we'll pick our email account. We'll decide who we're sending it to. In this case, I'm just going to use a specific person, maybe Layla. But you can pick any fields you want. You could pick, whoever the email address is on the AP bill or on the purchase order. You can be very creative there. And you can say, we're picking this formula is this percent over the purchase order. And we can add things, for example, as far as the bill reference. But in this case, we're going to take that and put that in the heart of the email. We'll go over here and say AP bill, insert data field. This is why we add the extra fields, so that we can now build out this email. So AP bill, this number over purchase order, and we'll add that data field as well. And you could even do a link. So we know, for example, if we want to find the bill, we know that this is our URL. So what we can do here is go back to our subscriber now with this URL. And insert a link, files from web. Here's the URL. However, we're going to take this out and we're going to change it. So one second, we're going to put this in as link to AP bill. We'll say insert. But what we want is this same field. So we'll go back to this area. We'll edit the link. And instead of the reference number being this, we'll change it to our field. So now we have that, and we'll save it. Now we'll close this. We'll go back to our business event. We have our subscriber in place. We're tracking the necessary fields. And now we'll create an example. So we'll go into a purchase order. We'll add a line item. So maybe we'll purchase an Acer laptop. One of them for $247. We'll remove the hold. We'll approve it. We'll receive it. We'll uncheck this create bill. I'd like to do that myself here. We'll click release. We'll now enter the AP bill, which will bring in this line into it. But we're going to change the unit cost here to $500. Our AP bill allows you to do that. We'll tab away. We'll save it. We'll give it an invoice number. And we didn't put any conditions that it had to be off hold or released or anything. But if we go to our generic inquiry and we refresh, notice we have a fourth line here. And this is over 100%. Now, if we go into our email, we can see our new email that went out to Layla saying AP bill 5377 purchase is 102% over the purchase order here. And if we click link to bill, assuming I got that link right, it'll bring us right in. And now we can start to investigate who created the bill, who approved it, and whatnot. So that's it. We took a situation that happens all the time, but in an effort to control costs and keep a lid on things and allow people to do their job without micromanaging them, but at the same point in time, be able to check on things that are critical. 10% might be 20% for you, or it might be 5% for you. Whatever the condition is, you can use this business event that we created to keep tabs on things that are important to you. And we could easily make this email activity instead a text message. We could make it a Teams message to a Teams channel. We can do a lot of things there. But that's it. Thanks for watching this video and subscribing to our channels. If you like the video, click the like button, please. And if you have any questions about this or anything else Acumatica, feel free to reach out to us. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks again, and have a great day.